Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're opening up a conversation that, well, it happens far too often in silence. We're diving into a powerful new movement that's really challenging that. We're exploring Defeat Cancer. It's a focused initiative powered by the advocacy organization ACCCOLPH, and it's all about fighting prostate cancer. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Their core mission, they describe it as more than awareness. It's a movement. It sounds like it's designed to be a real frontal assault on the huge stigma that often stops men from dealing with their health proactively. The goal seems simple, but pretty profound. Break the silence, save lives.
And that urgency is absolutely warranted. I mean, especially when you look at the sheer scale of the challenge. The statistics just for the U.S. in 2025, well, they really set the stakes immediately. We're looking at an estimated 313,780 men diagnosed.
Ooh, over 300,000.
Yeah. And tragically, about 35,770 lives potentially lost to this disease just in 1 year. That staggering number, those diagnoses and deaths, that's exactly why just awareness isn't enough. It really has to be a robust, action-oriented movement to push back.
That really puts the size of the problem into sharp focus right away. Now let's maybe set the scene a bit about the disease itself. Our sources highlight that prostate cancer is, get this, the most common solid organ cancer in men after skin cancer. It accounts for something like 30% of all male cancer cases. That's huge.
It's incredibly prevalent, yes.
So when ACCCOLPH, the organization driving this, uses that motto, speak up, save lives, what's the kind of fundamental medical fact behind that? What makes speaking up so powerful here?
The absolute key is early detection. That's the core. And what's fascinating here, really the statistic that underpins the whole mission, is that the disease is 99% treatable if it's caught early.
99%.
99%. Think about that. Almost every single man diagnosed has a really, really good chance at survival, at effective treatment, if it's found while it's still localized, still maybe slow growing, which it often is, in those initial stages.
A 99% treatability rate early on.
Mm-hmm.
That's, well, it's astounding. But we know men are still dying from this disease at high rates. So what's the disconnect? Is it just about not getting screened?
It's not just lack of screening. It's more about lack of, let's say, informed and timely screening. And that's combined with a kind of cultural tendency sometimes for men to ignore symptoms or maybe avoid having those necessary conversations. The movement definitely encourages men to get the screenings mentioned in the sources, the standard PSA blood tests, the digital exams.
Right.
But, for the informed listener, we understand screening isn't always completely straightforward. PSA tests, for example, they have their own controversies, right? False positives, maybe overdiagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where ACCCOLPH's approach gets interesting. They don't just shout, get screened. They focus on empowerment through knowledge. Making sure men understand, how to maybe interpret complex results, know their baseline number, have real informed talks with their doctors. That leads to diagnosis at that crucial, most treatable stage.
Okay, so that's where it gets really interesting then. Because the movement part, it clearly goes way beyond just pushing for one type of blood test. The sources list several reasons why this whole campaign is vital, beyond just finding it early. Things like promoting open conversations, driving research, funding trials, new treatments, and empowering survivors and advocates. Which of those do you think has the biggest, maybe long-term impact?
That's a great question. I mean, funding research is obviously critical for the future, for cures, but I'd argue that empowering survivors and advocates, that's the long-term game changer. Think about it when you have millions of men living with this disease, giving them a platform, letting them share their real stories. That transforms abstract statistics into human narratives.
Right, it makes it personal.
Exactly. And that personal testimony, that's often far more effective at breaking down that deep-seated stigma around men's health than, any generic public service announcement. It changes the whole conversation, from clinical dread to shared resilience, really.
That's a powerful point. Recognizing the battle doesn't just end with treatment. That's real advocacy. But let's circle back to that disconnect we mentioned. If it's 99% treatable early on, why are 35,000 men still dying each year? And that leads us straight into the critical risk factors, and maybe more importantly, the stark, painful disparities that exist in access, in outcome.
Absolutely.
The material notes that a huge number of men just aren't aware of their specific risk profile. So, okay, age is the obvious one. It goes up as you get older. But what are the other key risk factors cited? The ones men really need to know about.
Well, the critical ones are family history, race, and underlying genetics. And this raises a really important point, especially when we talk about mortality. If we know the disease is so treatable early on, the fact that death rates are wildly different depending on your background, that points to a systemic failure. It's something ACCCOLPH is directly trying to address. We absolutely have to look closely at the statistics on disparity. They're central to the movement's mission.
Okay, let's hear them.
Black men are 1.7 times more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer compared to white men.
Okay, 1.7 times more likely to get it.
But here's the really alarming number, the mortality rate. They are 2.1 times more likely to die from it.
2.1 times. That is a staggering disparity. What do the sources suggest are the reasons for that?
Yeah.
That massive 2.1x mortality gap.
Yeah.
Is it purely biological, or are we looking at these complex issues like access to care, maybe trust in the system?
The sources strongly suggest that awareness or lack thereof and that cultural stigma we talked about are enormous factors, and these often just compound underlying issues, whether they're socioeconomic or systemic problems with access. When the organization pushes Speak Up, they're fighting that idea that silence equals strength. For many men, particularly in high-risk communities, there might be deep mistrust of the medical system, maybe just less access to specialized care. And that means diagnoses often come later. So that 2.1x statistic essentially tells us Black men aren't just getting the disease more often, they're often getting diagnosed when it's much further along, past that 99% treatable stage.
Which makes speaking up even more critical for those communities.
Precisely.
And the risk factor related to family history.
Yeah.
That's also very direct, very actionable, isn't it? Something anyone listening can check on right now.
Absolutely. Having a father or a brother with prostate cancer more than doubles your own individual risk, more than doubles it. These are real data points that, frankly, need to be discussed openly at the family dinner table, in the doctor's office. So the core mission of awareness here, it's about normalizing these kinds of sensitive health talks among men, making it okay. It's about changing what's historically been maybe a private, even shameful health issue into a necessary public conversation, one that saves lives by making sure men do talk to their doctors, their families, their friends about symptoms, about screening history.
Wow. That connection you drew, linking the 99% treatability rate directly to that awful 2.1x mortality disparity, that really defines the battlefield for this movement, doesn't it?
It really does.
This whole comprehensive approach to advocacy, it naturally leads you to ask, what sets ACCCOLPH itself and this Defeat Cancer movement apart from maybe other large health organizations? What's their unique angle?
I think the core differentiator is really its DNA, its origin. The organization is built literally from the ground up by seasoned prostate cancer survivors, people who have walked this exact difficult road themselves.
Oh, okay.
They aren't just administrators running programs, they're leveraging their own lived experience. And that survivor-led model, it gives them a unique, almost visceral understanding of the emotional challenges, the physical challenges, the whole gauntlet this diagnosis presents.
It makes sense. They know it.
Exactly. And that deep experiential knowledge lets them serve as a truly independent voice for survivors and their families. They can speak with real authority, not just about the medical facts, but about the fear, the treatment side effects, the recovery, the ongoing emotional support that's needed. It means the advice, the guidance they give, it's rooted in practical reality, not just, clinical theory.
That must dramatically change the kind of advice you get, knowing the person talking has literally been there, walked out of that treatment room themselves. And this independence, this survivor-led approach, it translates into very specific practical support. They're not just asking for donations, they're building actual community structures.
That's exactly right. They tackle the challenge on several key fronts strategically. First, there's education, providing those critical resources about early detection, detailed treatment options, helping people navigate the information. Second is targeted support. Hosting tailored support groups, they specifically mention the men's group for prostate cancer, fostering that essential, non-judgmental space for men to share challenges and successes.
Yeah, and what about that third piece, community engagement?
Yeah.
I saw the sources mention things like a comedy and cocktails night. That sounds fun. But how does something purely social translate into real medical action or, say, policy influence? Is that just sort of soft fundraising?
That's a really good question, actually. And it speaks directly to how strategically they use community outreach. Events like comedy and cocktails, they serve a really powerful function, destigmatization.
Oh.
When you can pull the conversation out of the, sterile doctor's office and put it into a relaxed social setting, it normalizes the topic. It uses humor, fellowship to kind of chip away at the dread and the shame. It makes the whole conversation more accessible. It encourages men who might never attend a formal medical seminar to actually engage with the topic, maybe for the first time. So it's a crucial tool for amplifying their message and raising the essential funds they need for their focused work.
Okay, that makes sense. Using community to lower the barriers.
Precisely. And beyond that, their focus areas are very targeted. They specifically mention uplifting caregivers and families because cancer impacts everyone around the patient. And they specifically highlight veterans. That commitment to empowering men, especially veterans, is a powerful reminder that their advocacy is tailored. It recognizes that some communities face unique institutional barriers, maybe cultural barriers, to speaking up about health.
It really sounds like their programs are meticulously designed then to move men from feeling isolated and maybe scared into a place of collective hope, collective action. The message is undeniably clear. You don't have to face this alone. That combination, the survivor leadership and that kind of tailored community outreach, it must be incredibly effective at turning information into real power for people.
I think it is.
So let's bring it back. What does all this mean for you listening right now? We've covered a lot of crucial ground: prevalence, treatability, those stark disparities. The essential takeaway really is this. Prostate cancer is highly prevalent. Remember that 30% of male cancer cases, but critically, it is 99% treatable if caught early. And that makes open, honest conversation absolutely vital. Knowing your specific risk profile, especially regarding family history, and the significantly increased risk for Black men is essential knowledge.
We really have to reinforce that core message that defines ACCOLPH's work: knowledge, support, action. The sources contain a direct, urgent call to action for everyone listening. Prostate cancer doesn't wait. The single most important thing you can take away from this deep dive is to take charge of your own health. Speak up about your risk factors and make the appointment. Schedule your screening today. Don't put it off.
Yeah. The power of this movement really seems to lie in that unique authority of survivor-led advocacy and just the sheer determination to turn fear into hope. We talked about ACCCOLPH's explicit focus on specific groups, like veterans, reflected in source titles like Invisible Battles, Prostate Cancer, and the Veteran Community.
Which leaves us with maybe a final provocative thought for you to consider. If the most critical factor in this whole battle is breaking the silence, how might this specific model, survivor-led, community-focused, how might it uniquely change the institutional barriers, the cultural resistance that men in high-risk groups often face? What does it really mean for public health when peer experience, when the trusted voice of a survivor becomes potentially more valuable, more powerful in some communities than official policy or generic advice? It suggests that this kind of tailored personal advocacy, it might just be the crucial next step in really winning this fight, turning fear into hope and information into power.